for you?
I just started the recording, so with that, thank you, NUFYP students. And if there are any first-year students here, thank you for coming. Michael Lewis is a professor in the School of Engineering and Digital Sciences, and he is here today just to give you a little overview of the program, but I'll stop talking and I'll let him take over. So, after you.
Hey. Yeah, thank you, Eric, for the invitation. It's always a pleasure to meet with the NUFYP students because you guys have spent the last year really getting acclimated to the campus. At least this is what it is historically. This year, with the pandemic, not such a typical experience, but generally, you're now in the process of transitioning from your preparatory program into the schools. And this process is non-trivial. It's an important one, and this transition, I think, is significant in many respects. And so we'd like to be as welcoming as we can be, but also address your questions and concerns along the way. So today is an overview, if you will, but it doesn't mean it's your only opportunity. You can always follow up with us, either collectively or individually. We have a very solid group in terms of our admissions team, both for the university, but also for the school. And you would be welcome over time to chat with some of our department chairs and faculty members. And in fact, we often extend the invitation that you're welcome to sit in on some of the lectures if it helps you just to get a feel for the various domains of expertise and the disciplines that we have available. Of course, this year that would mean very likely participating online, and that's very easy to do in the scheme of things if you're really motivated to do so. Now, I think most of you know what you would like to do, and you have a pretty good idea of where you'd like to go. So what I think I'd like to do is walk you through the official presentation. Along the way, tell you a few stories that might be relevant for you, because as an old guy with a silver beard, that's one of the things I have to do is tell stories to students. But I do want to try to give you a feel for what we're about and what you can expect ongoing. Now, so why don't we get underway? As Eric said, my name is Michael Lewis. I'm an associate professor in our School of Engineering and Digital Sciences. I was actually hired by the startup partners from Carnegie Mellon University to help launch our School of Science and Technology some years ago. I'd been working with Carnegie Mellon for 5 years at their Software Engineering Institute, where I was a senior technical staff member. I helped develop the cybersecurity national strategies and actually was asked to then help launch that strategy in an exemplar format in Qatar, where Carnegie Mellon had a branch campus. And as part of that project, when we were winding down, the timing was such that the Nazarbayev University project was just getting started. And so the team there, they knew about my experience previously in several high-profile American universities, and in particular working with international projects in startup environments. And so they invited me to come out and be a part of that team. I expected to be out here for about 3 years, and now I'm in year 11. I found the project interesting. I very much liked the programs, the students, the environment. My family was very happy here. My children have basically grown up here. So what started off as simply a project actually became a major stage in my career. I say this to you because there are many of us here who are here by choice. We chose to come to this university because of the high profile and the ambition and the vision. At the time, there were no other projects like this in the world. So I'll say a little bit more as we go forward in this overview. Now, speaking of overview, as you learn in Foundation, I should begin by presenting an outline of my talk. So I'll tell you a little bit about our school, how it fits into the university. I'll describe our programs, a list of the programs briefly. I'll then talk a little bit more about the particulars of the school in terms of some elements of our labs and programs, and then I'll share with you the contact information. Now, while I'm very proud of my Department of Computer Science and our School of Engineering and Digital Sciences, you will not hear me disparage the other schools. I will not speak ill of humanities or sciences, because actually I quite admire those programs. My own background is that I come from a College of Arts and Sciences. Previously, our School of Science and Technology was together, and I worked for many years in a very humanities-oriented set of programs where we collaborated with technology in the humanities. So for me, this is a big university. It's very broad, very diverse, and there's room for everybody. And in my instance, our school has about half of the students, undergraduate students, bachelor students that are in the university, and my department is enormous. It has about 1/4 of all students in the university, roughly half of those that are in SEDS. Computer science, as you might have heard, is somewhat popular. I hear there are good career prospects. That's not to say in every other discipline that you won't find good training, good education, and good career prospects. And in today's presentation, I'm going to describe some of that to you. And I apologize if some of my students, some of my stories for the students tend to be a little bit computationally oriented. It's just my slight bias. Okay, so having said that, our school was established relatively recently. As you know, at one time, there were more undergraduate schools in Nazarbayev University. But as we looked at global trends, our president and our provost began to consider that there might be a way to align the programs better to create synergies across the disciplines. And so the conscious decision was made to restructure from our School of Engineering and our School of Humanities and Social Sciences and our School of Science and Technology to restructure those in a way that created, on the one hand, a School of Science and Humanities, effectively a College of the Arts and Sciences, and on the other, a more applied program related to engineering and digital sciences. And at the time, you might not know, some very big American universities, such as MIT, were moving in a similar direction, and in fact created an entirely separate and independent school of digital sciences. So this is why the changes were made. Even though we were a young university, we were still very interested in review, a reflective process every year, and then considering what we think provided for the best research opportunities, but also the best opportunities for the students. And we will emphasize this over the course of the presentation and why this helped maybe create some new opportunities. Okay, so for our school as a whole, we're fairly big, meaning by American standards, we're roughly mid-size. If the average liberal arts college is about 1,000 students and the average engineering school is maybe 3,000 or 4,000 students, but the average state university could be tens of thousands, we don't want to be small, small, small. We also don't want to be so big that our programs become unmanageable and that our students become numbers rather than names. So very consciously, they chose a target. Right now, we're around 5,000 students altogether. The target would be over time approximately 8,000. About 60% of those should be undergraduate students, and the remainder will be graduate students, either master's or PhD. Now, those percentages will change a little bit, but this is kind of where we are and where we're going. Now, the numbers I'm showing you here at the bottom of the screen, those are slightly out of date. We probably have a few more students than that now in each of these categories. But the ambition is, since our university is a research-oriented university, we would like to focus on expanding those graduate programs because we would like to have research-infused teaching in our undergraduate programs. And I'll talk a lot more about that in a few minutes. But basically, in our bachelor programs, your first 2 years are fairly standard in terms of core courses, curricular core and discipline core. They're things you need to know. But then as we move from those first 2 years into the third and fourth years, those courses are not just textbook-oriented courses, but they're taught by researchers using primary sources, and very often the exercises and the tasking is based on the research experience of our teaching assistants, our research assistants, our postdoctoral researchers, and our faculty. Now, to these ends, nearly all of our faculty, I think all but one, have a terminal degree, a PhD in their fields. This is much higher than the average in a US university, where it's about 80%, where you have maybe 80% with PhDs and then some 20% who are considered industry-oriented experts with great experience who belong in the academy. We have a much higher percentage than usual, and they are international. We come, I think now the number of countries, it's more than 60 countries from which our faculty have come to Kazakhstan. So we have spent the last 11 years recruiting globally. I think there's no university in the world that has conducted as much hiring as NU. And we did this with a particular profile in mind. We were trying to build certain domains of expertise, and we wanted everyone to be research active. And this is a point I'll return to later. And then kind of going from the bottom to the top here, in order to accomplish this, we built laboratories. We built laboratories, world-class, modern, often with equipment that did not exist in this region. So when we ordered this equipment, it was quite challenging because it was often the first example of that equipment in the region. So acquiring, installing, configuring, and supporting that equipment was difficult. But when I show you subsequent slides, you're going to see a lot of pictures of empty laboratories and shiny equipment. There's a reason for this, because we need you to know that not only is the curricula that we're offering, well, the individual curricula across the board, they're modern, they're current, they're aligned with the international professional societies' best practices and the accreditation standards, those guidelines. We're using the right topical coverage, using the right reference materials in modern laboratories, much newer again than your average lab. And it's because of this that our students tend to be so much involved in the research. And I'll say more about that later. But to a surprising extent, even our bachelor students are involved in the laboratories, conducting the research, and they even co-author papers with our faculty members. Okay, so I will kind of move on here. The undergraduate programs in our school, you can see quite a range: chemical and materials engineering, civil and environmental, computer science. As I mentioned, I was brought in as a member of our computer science department. Just for information, I served as the chair of the department for 4 years. And then I followed that by serving as the vice dean for academic affairs for our school for 4 years. Now I am the coordinator of our master's program in data science, and I'm the director of our professional training, professional development programs, where we conduct some outreach to government and industry, trying to figure out a way that we can kind of level up people and improve their background and their training. So we also have electrical and computer engineering, mechanical and aerospace, and unusually, robotics and mechatronics. The robotics program is world-class. It's one of the most prolific in terms of research. The laboratories are amazing. The work they do is first-rate. And I mention all of this because it is highly unusual to even have an undergraduate program in robotics. The only reason we have that program is that, as I mentioned, our startup partner for this program was Carnegie Mellon University. And Carnegie Mellon is quite well known for computer science and robotics. Now, the startup program for the rest of our engineering programs, you might recall, was University College London. So we have some of the best programs in the world that helped us shape the programs, develop the courses, and hire the faculty. And this is why, again, we have such a diverse group with such a range of achievements. So I presume that most of you have an idea as to which of these programs that you might enter. And if I don't mention it later, please do remind me to tell you a little bit about your first year of study and why that might be interesting, because we actually give you a little bit of flexibility, and just put a pin in that so I can come back to that point. Of course, beyond the bachelor programs, we have quite a range of master programs. You'll notice that it's a longer list, and there are many more than this besides. And in fact, with many of our programs, even the bachelor programs, there's a certain amount of interdisciplinary work. But in particular at the graduate program, at the graduate level, it's very easy for someone to establish a project which crosses disciplinary boundaries, and where the thesis committee for the master's thesis might include someone from computer science and then biology or math or electrical engineering. This happens quite frequently. For us, as an example, you might know, you might have heard, machine learning is big, artificial intelligence is big. This is not restricted to just computer science. Every one of our disciplines, in fact, could benefit from applications of machine learning. We have many courses where machine learning is one of the topics, and it's not just in our school. There's machine learning and AI in the sciences as well. In fact, we have modeling and simulation courses, which historically were often the purview of computer science, but some of the best people in modeling and simulation at our university, I'll say it, are in physics. And we have similar opportunities in the Department of Chemistry, where they do tremendous work with modeling. Long before you would walk into a laboratory and do hands-on work, you would be testing and simulating that work to see which of the variations would be the most viable to test in the lab. So we are very progressive in that respect, and we have a remarkable amount of capacity to do this kind of work. So just for you to keep in mind. Now, and of course, PhD programs. That's probably beyond your event horizon these days. Now, I do want to mention as well, again, these labs. I promised you pictures of labs, but lots of labs, lots of gear. I don't even know anymore how many labs we have. Dozens and dozens in every department. And we've got them in block 3, we've got them in block 7, block 8, block 9, and block C4. We've also got facilities outside. And in some cases, we've got facilities which don't fit on campus, and we use them off campus. We also have agreements with our research partners where we have access to facilities outside even of not just NU, but outside of Kazakhstan. So this is an important detail. I have visited, for example, many of your high schools, more than 40 of them over the years. I've been all over the country. I've seen the gear that you worked with in your labs. And I know that many of the labs in chemistry, in physics, for example, are more or less demonstration labs, and that maybe the instructor could do the experiments, but often the students were relegated to just watching. I've also seen in many of the other Kazakh universities, I've seen their labs. And I admire, by the way, what they're able to do in general with their programs and their students. But I can tell you from my own firsthand experience that our labs are newer and better equipped. We have had a tremendous investment from the government over the years, and it's been directed to build these domains of expertise. And a big part of bringing all of these international faculty here was to make sure that they had the equipment such that their talents were not wasted. So I know we've got the gear, and this is an advantage for you guys, because when you work here and you leave our program, when you graduate, you will have worked with state-of-the-art equipment, and you'll be ready to transition from our classrooms and labs into government and industry. So just something to keep in mind. Now, so that's why we show these pictures. You know, these pictures are more for my benefit than yours, because they're a reminder of what chapters of the story that I need to tell you. Now, this one is to remind you as well, although you've suffered a little bit this past year because of the pandemic and the restrictions, this will change soon. We will be back in more or less normal working order, in my view, by fall semester, probably even over the summer. But for you guys, what matters is what's happening in the fall term. And so I believe that we will be running at least, well, 80 or 90% of our program as we used to do it. Several courses will probably remain in a hybrid mode because in the view of the faculty and the students, some courses actually worked better that way. But we want you. We want you on campus. We want you in the classroom. We want you around in the labs, in the atrium, and so on. As part of that, why do I tell you this? Because there's an awful lot of opportunities for you to not just come to our campus, but others. And maybe I'll work my way up again from the bottom here. We have academic mobility agreements with a lot of other programs around the world. And every year we send dozens of students to Turkey, to Greece, to the United Kingdom, to Germany, Australia, I mean, just all over, Korea. These programs, we have them with these other institutions, often based on the professional and personal relationships of our faculty and administration. So we often have more opportunities than we have qualified students to take them. It's remarkable. What this means is academic mobility. You could do an exchange semester, maybe to one of our partners, the official partners, over to, I don't know, Pittsburgh or Penn or Wisconsin, or maybe to, well, there's just so many. University of Illinois, for example, we did for many years. These can be done in some cases during the academic year as an exchange semester, or they can be done over the summer. Historically, we sent somewhere in the neighborhood of 60 to 80 students every year to our partner schools. So they could go to Carnegie Mellon, to Wisconsin, to whichever ones happen to have the arrangement. I think one year we sent them to the State University of New York in Buffalo, just many options. So academic mobility will hopefully re-engage. This program is primarily intended after you've done your first 2 years. The biggest effect for that program would be in the third year, but always the students and their parents ask about this. They really would like to have that international experience. So that's why I emphasize this. Of course, we have the Olympiads. Many of you have participated in Olympiads, and we've had some remarkable teams that have performed well internationally. Our guys have placed in the top tiers around the world. But I have to tell you, for us, it's more like a hobby. It's not your main activity. It's more like you do it as a club, but we don't want that work to distract you from your other work. Again, since I'm a storyteller, I'm going to tell you a story. We know that many of the Olympiad students from secondary school often are very one-dimensional. They're very good at their subject, but because they were good at that subject, their teachers used to give them exemptions from other subjects. And often they didn't know very much outside of their main subject, and this worked to their disadvantage. So we don't want our people to be one-dimensional. We want them to be very well-rounded, and this is why we don't emphasize so much the Olympiad experience. But we do it, and you can continue doing it. And we pay for people to participate. I mentioned the involvement in research, in the labs and the groups. And if you find yourself in such a group and you're contributing, you could become noted as a co-author of one of our papers. I think the last time I did a count of this, it was 2 or 3 years ago, there were at least 50 of those papers in a single year that had been published, where our faculty, of course, were driving the research, the students participated, and they received co-authorship, and we sent them to the conference to participate and present. Now, last year, the year before, this has been interrupted, but this is a practice, a longstanding practice. We're a research university. We encourage you to get involved early, and there are effectively rewards for doing so. And then, of course, we do lots and lots of internships. There's practically an infinite number. Those are here nationally, regionally, and internationally. And the more technical your discipline, the more likely that you can get an international internship. And often those internships lead to job offers. Out of my first graduating class that graduated about 7 years ago, I think 2/3 of them did those internships. More than half of them have worked abroad. Many continue to do so, many came back. But again, the training that we give is globally competitive. All right, now I'll breeze through these next sections. I'll just tell you that we have a lot of successful students. And you will find on the websites of every school, of every department, lots and lots of stories. We've been around a while now. We're no longer a startup university. We've had, 6 or 7 cycles of graduates. Many of them have gone on for graduate school as well. So we have hundreds of students out there with master's degrees and PhDs, and we're working all over the world. And they have lots of stories. So this set of stories is just a representative sample. I certainly could not do them justice by telling you each of them individually here, but it's something special. The opportunities that you have, if you're interested to take advantage of them, are there for you. Okay, and then there are some examples here where we have individual profiles, and these are somewhat dated because I didn't prepare this set of profiles. These were done by our office team. But again, there's no shortage of these stories to tell. We've got students now, again, all over Europe, Asia, North America, Eastern Europe, in graduate programs at both levels, master's and PhD, but in particular, the industry placement is something astonishing. So if we were to read these stories, examine what it is that they've been doing and where they're doing it, our guys can swim in these waters. You know, the background they've had, the courses they've had, prepare them for these locations. And by the way, I want to emphasize something in particular. Where I come from, there are not a lot of women in math, science, and engineering. And in fact, the government spends a ton of money trying to encourage women to get involved in these fields. Is it because, do you think that maybe women can't do math or engineering or science? Well, actually, not at all. That is not the case. And in Kazakhstan, there's something extraordinary. We have a staggering number of women in math, engineering, and science. I mean, unbelievable. Figures that, well, they're roughly half of our students, but it's better than that. And boys, I'm looking for you to help me out here, but I have to confess, if we were to look at the top 10 students in many of our disciplines, say computer science, what, 7 out of the top 10 tend to be female. They are rock stars. And in fact, we brought several years ago out to our campus the dean of engineering from Stanford University, who happens to be female. And she came out here because our ACM, the Association for Computing Machinery Women's Group, invited her. She came for a week. She ran a workshop in data science. I coordinated this because I'm our program coordinator for data science. And when she came here, she did not believe it until she saw it herself. The number and the quality of the women that we had. She said this was something so unusual that she now tells the story back in California and when she goes to conferences about just how strong our women in math and science happen to be. So this picture is not just because Galia has been successful and is a good example, but it's a reminder for me to tell you about our women. And where do they go? Well, companies all over the world. This is just a scattershot, just a sampling of where our guys have landed. So not only these companies, but these institutions. This is pretty strong. You know, it's worth lingering on this because the placement of our graduates is phenomenal. In fact, I have a problem. I'm going to confess this to you. The problem is my seniors and my graduate students don't follow my advice in the following way. I tell them, don't be in such a hurry to get a job and work. You have your whole life to work. Take full advantage of your university degree, your bachelor experience, maybe your master's. You know, the problem I have is that students are taking jobs because they have so much opportunity. Even in their third year, they're taking jobs because they want to be wanted. They're happy to make the money. It helps their family and so on. Of course, it makes it slightly more complicated to do your studies and to work. But the problem we have is not that our students have trouble getting jobs, is that they have too much opportunity and often they're taking the jobs so early. Something to keep in mind. Now, here, I just show you this in general to say thanks for the attention and to kind of motivate you. This was a picture of one of our graduating classes, I think 3 years ago. But more importantly, I want to share with you the contact information for our school. Of course, you know where we are, but maybe you need to visit. Maybe that is you'd like to go to either the engineering program itself or to the Facebook page and so on. But this is the contact information. Generally, we show some of this information even for the direct entry students who don't know our university at all. In fact, some of you might have seen this a year ago somewhere else. Maybe we visited Almaty, for example, and you saw us there. But we tend to close with the contact information and an invitation that you follow up, that you visit the website, that you check us out in general in all of the social media channels. But if you have specific questions about a program, we can put you in touch with our faculty members, either the chair of that department or maybe some representative faculty. Now, I mentioned to you that I would give a relatively short presentation, and I hope I kept my word, 30 minutes. I gave you the official slides, so the girls in our office should be happy about that. I didn't go off script too much, but I would like to take a few moments here, and if you have questions, then I'd be happy to try to answer them. And if I can't answer them, then presumably someone will take notes and try to marshal this information back to you. I forgot one detail. And in fact, I may have another set of slides where I have something that I wanted to share with you. Let's see if I have that handy. Yeah, I do. I have another presentation here where I wanted to share with you what the first year program looks like in computer science. And do you know why I'm doing this? I'll tell you the story. For many of you, you chose your subject matter in maybe 8th grade. Maybe you chose chemistry or math or physics or biology, and you began to specialize. And you followed that path. It used to be you could not vary from that path. But how do you know what you want to do in the 8th or 9th grade, right? So we made a conscious decision that we want our students, no matter what they did in high school, to be able to reassess so that when they came to foundation, they would get a foundation preparation. And from foundation into the schools, they could go into any program, not just the one where they studied in high school. But even from there, we take the position that in your first year, you still might decide that you want to change. Almost nowhere in Kazakhstan is this possible, but we designed our programs with decision points, inflection points, such that if you look at the computer science curriculum for year one, in the first semester, you take calculus, physics, programming, and history of Kazakhstan. And lots of students take that program. It's fairly generic. In semester 2, you'll take calculus 2, physics 2, computer science 2. You notice the pattern? And maybe rhetoric. Okay, but let me show you something. What does the program look like for robotics? Calculus, physics, programming, history. What about the second semester? Calculus 2, physics 2, computer science 2. Well, what about this? Mathematics. First semester, calculus 1, physics 1, programming 1, history. Do you see this? We did this on purpose. The first year has not only common core in terms of university courses, but across many disciplines, you're taking many of the same courses. And if you slowly learn that you'd rather change from computer science to computer engineering, you could. If you want to go from computer science to math or vice versa, you could do so. So that we have now an opportunity for you, not just once, but twice, to take a decision. You'll take your first decision on your progression. And then a year from now, you still would have the opportunity to change again. Now, that's a little more difficult if you're trying to change from biology into computer science or vice versa. Some transitions are easier than others. But I want to tell you this because you may have more options than you realize. And the decision that you're taking now is simply your progression decision. But you might find yourself, it doesn't close that many doors to you because we took the decision several years ago to try to make it more open rather than more closed. Now, I've told this story and I see we have some potential questions popping up. Let's see what we've got. Okay. You know, Altanai, your question about progression is interesting because the students sometimes believe that there's like a difficult path and then maybe a back door. But I'll explain to you how we work generally. If you reach the thresholds for progression, it's automatic. And you progress into the school. I think in the science and humanities, you actually come in as an undecided major, and then later you kind of decide your major, although you probably know if you're going into physics what you're doing. For SEDS, you probably come in directly to a department. And it used to be that there were limits, hard limits on the number that each department would take. But now it's been more open-ended, such that we have capacity to adjust. We are not strictly working on a cohort model. So for you to progress, as long as you get the right scores with your English and your math, for example, then you will come in with no trouble. If you're below those thresholds, then what will happen is that you migrate into the direct admissions pool. And for direct admissions, the way that we work is for every application stream. For this, I mean NIS schools, FISMATs, Turkish Lycea, whatever they might be, each one of them has a path. All of them have academic credentials. All of them have English proficiency and subject proficiency, right? And the like. We have a mechanism where we rank those students, we normalize them within their category. The best of the NIS students all the way down to the worst. We do that again with other categories, right? And then we bring all the categories together and we have one list. So what will happen is if you progress, then you're in. Great. And we'll start to get you into the right courses for next fall. If you do not progress and you become, it's not automatic, that you get moved into the direct admission pile and you get a second chance where you'll be kind of rank order competitive with all the other applicants. So we don't really give preference these days, although there has been a lot of discussion about trying to reduce the number of computer science majors and move them into other disciplines. But here's the issue. You might know computer science is popular, and the government has said that there's an enormous shortage of IT workers and computer science trained people. And they're asking us to increase, not decrease. So we have not limited the admissions. Okay. You know, Adilhan, I'm going to say no about research assistants. The question is, can first-year students really get involved in research? Generally, no. The reason is you don't know anything yet in terms of laboratory procedures and the subject area. We need you to get the fundamentals. For example, with chemistry, if we put you in a lab and you don't have the right training, then it's actually quite dangerous for you and for others. Or in biology, we do research. We have a biohazard lab. And this is like a CDC rated biohazard lab with particular conventions. If you have not been through the training, we cannot allow untrained people to work in those scenarios. So even if you have a strong interest, it's very rare for a first-year student to get involved in the research. And I'll tell you something else. You know, I served as our vice dean for those years. I was in charge of progression, probation, dismissal, and so on. If you take your first year of courses and get a B average or better, you have a very high probability of finishing your bachelor degree on time. If you have below a 3.0, below a B, then you have a pretty good chance of not finishing on time. If you get below 2.0, a C your first year, you have a very high chance of not finishing at all. Why do I tell you this story? Not to scare you. You guys are all very smart and you want to do everything. So you want to take more courses, you want to join 5 clubs, and you want to be active in research. And you're going to be distracted by sports, by girls, by boys. It happens. So I want you to focus first and foremost on yourselves, meaning eat well and sleep well, because often they don't, and that's a problem. Also, the students, you think the classes are easy and you start to take them lightly, and then you get behind. If you go to class and do the homework, you're practically guaranteed to get a B or better. So in the first year, the reason we reduced the number of courses on the list that I showed you is we want you to finish those core courses with Bs or better. And quite frankly, we're going to discourage you from doing research in the first year. I want you to get the first year in the books, on the record, with a strong GPA. If you do that, everything from that point on is good. If you overextend yourselves in the first year and you take 6 courses and join 5 clubs and start dating and you get a job or whatever, you think you can do it all and you can't. You can't. So that's my answer about research. That's a little bit of a lecture, but I'm slipping that in there. Now, what else? Yeah, the international exchange programs, DS, usually the core for that, the minimum, the floor, is you need a 3.0 average or better to even be considered. And for some programs, the average is higher. And if it's a competitive program, then they do it in rank order from the highest down. So you really want to have a good grade point average. If you're very strong in math and calculus is easy, then in the first semester, I expect you to go to class and get an A in calculus. Because if you do that, it's going to raise your prospects later. What some students will do is say, man, I went to a good school. I know this calculus, the teacher's boring. I could do that in my sleep. So then, well, you don't do it and you skip some homework, you skip some classes, you blow a quiz, you weren't prepared. Maybe you slept through the quiz. I don't know. It happens. And instead of getting the A, you get the C. That hurts you because then in year 3, you're like, oh man, I didn't get to go to Wisconsin or to Pittsburgh or to Washington because I had a low GPA my first year. So I really do encourage you to be good students in your first year. And even if you think you know it all, because you will in the beginning, keep going because we move more quickly. And often you fall behind before you realize you fell behind. So criteria though, B or better, B or better. And it tends to be competitive. So if 20 people apply and there's only 2 positions or 3, you know how it goes. What about textbook topics or textbooks? Altanai, in other words, over the summer, you might be interested to study some things. Okay. Do you know what the 2 main factors that correlate to success are in our school? Your English language skills and your math skills. So if you could reinforce both of those, I know you've been doing them in foundation, do them again. Do you know what I do for my students at both the undergraduate and graduate level? I teach them how to write essays, 30-minute essays on issues, and then they're assessed according to a rubric. And these are what we call the graduate record examination essays. I have a whole thing that I do on this, and it raises our students from performing at the 20th percentile, it moves them up to the 80th percentile. And you can do these at any level. You don't just have to do them for applying to graduate school. So if you are going to study over the summer, reinforce your knowledge of English and math. And if you want to do a little bit of coding, because everybody codes these days, then we have online courses in Python and for C and for Java. There's a lot of material there. And we could share some of that with you. We do a tremendous amount of that now. And there's some online courses that we share with our students that come from places like MIT or these other MOOCs. If you're really serious about a subject area, then we can put you in touch with the chair of the right department, and they can tell you, you know what, if you really want to get ahead, review some of this material, and then you'll come in with a running start. Yeah, Alihan, Eric has recorded this, and I understand that they will post the video later. Baghdad, it's actually not the case for us. We accept a tremendous number of students, and we have not capped the programs. Years ago, the reason the story persists is that at one time the engineering programs had strict limits, 30 students, let's say, for electrical engineering, and you could not go beyond that. But we've changed the format. They used a British-style cohort approach previously, but then we switched from the British model to the American model. We do it credit-based. We offer courses and then lagging courses so that if you miss one, you can retake it. The program is much more flexible now than it was 8 or 10 years ago. So we've lifted those caps. We take hundreds of students each year in computer science, but we take, I don't know, 1,000 students into, or maybe 900 into engineering as a whole, big entering classes. We have not capped our classes, but we don't take all people because, for example, if a generic student fails English and fails math, then they will not succeed in our program if they fail foundation programs. And so if they were to walk into our first semester courses, we know from experience that they will have negative outcomes and they would be dismissed in the first year. The success is not good for such scores. So if I were giving you advice, right? If I were giving you advice, I would tell you in the coming weeks, you should take care of yourselves, sleep well, eat well. Do you know if you don't sleep well, your performance degrades, your short-term memory and your recall degrade. It's like going into class as though you were drunk from a wedding from the day before. It hurts you. So when students stay up all night, it's terrible. You need what I call the grandmother schedule. It's not very sexy. It's not very, exciting, but you need to go to bed on time and you need to get up in the morning at a consistent time and you need to eat. A little kasha maybe in the morning, I don't know, but you need to eat on a regular basis because if you don't eat well and sleep well, you are not prepared. Your brain isn't ready. And we know from the research on cognitive science and pedagogy and so on, teaching and learning, that you need to be well prepared. So go to class, do the homework, take care of yourself, but also talk to your teachers. If you're behind on something, you guys, I hear a couple of you play video games. How do you maximize your points? Gold coins, fruits, you want to maximize it. And you know, if you take one route, you can get more than if you go another route, right? So think of this as a way to just accrue the most points. How do I get the most points? Sometimes our students don't prioritize and they spend 20 hours on a project that's worth 5 points and they spend 1 hour on a project that's worth 25 points. So you might want to think about what's coming and optimize your time. And if you're a little bit behind, talk to your teacher and ask them for guidance. What should I emphasize as I try to end my academic year, right? So more than anything else, I think those things matter the most. Now, okay, I see Eric has already posted the video channel and there's going to be a link. And, oh, good question, Gauhar, about computer science or math for working as a data scientist. I designed our data science program. I designed it based on what we saw from our partners at Carnegie Mellon, New York University, Stanford University, MIT. I visited some of their programs and vice versa. We know what goes in there for the moment. And surprisingly, they're both good. You can be a computer scientist with a math minor or a math major with a computer science minor. To be a good data scientist, you really need to be very strong in probability and statistics and linear algebra. You need to be able to work with big data sets. You have to be very strong in programming, but what does that mean these days? Most of the data science work is being done in Python using the NumPy libraries and a few others, because as they like to say, it was built by data scientists for data scientists. In our data science graduate program, the language we teach them first is Python. And then I teach that class. I run them through 5 or 6 of the main libraries, and we learn how to gather data from sensor sources, how to unpack raw data, how to put it into matrices, how to perform basic computations on those matrices, how to do basic probability and statistics, and so on. So the point is, they're both good. And for a student coming into the graduate program in data science or looking to become a professional data scientist, and I already have many students now with that job title, recent graduates, but coming into our data science program, we will take bachelor students from computer science, electrical engineering, math, physics, even economics. We have them from all of these disciplines. I think probably computer science is better. That's what I would say. But they're both good for this. Now, platforms and channels. Oh, yeah, there's, Tamerlan, with this question, the Career and Advising Center has a lot of these testimonials. And we have also, each department has kind of a list of people that they keep track of and that communicate. And often when they come back to town, we arrange for them to give talks. So for example, 3 of my students from last year, I mentioned data science, all 3 were hired in companies as data scientists, and I bring them back. And I tell them, if you were giving advice, if the current you was giving advice to the previous you, like the freshman or sophomore version, what advice would you give? What courses were important? Which ones were less important? What guidance would you give? And they do it. And so we announce these lectures, we announce these talks when they come in. And probably what we should do, given the pandemic impact, we should record a few of those. But short talks, 20 minutes, where people who went through our programs and know the markets give advice to the students. You know what? I'm going to ask a couple of them. Maybe we can initiate that and we can talk to Eric about making some links, because they're generally very amenable to it, as long as we're not talking about, a week-long course or something. And even there, they cooperate. The pros and cons are very important. But right now, what our guys say, they want 2 things. They want interesting work, and I agree with this, because if you're interested in the work, everything else is small, and they want good financial compensation. Luckily for us, all of these disciplines, they get good financial compensation. And generally what happens is our graduates are taking care of their extended families, right? Back in their hometowns. So what is it, like Ajay, his grandmother, Ajay Gulnar, and some distant relatives, because the money they're making working in data science or math or physics or chemical engineering, these are well-compensated professional positions, even for students with bachelor degrees. Alahan, offhand, I can't tell you those courses, but we have lots of information on this. You can reach out either to our department chair or to Ben Tyler. Dr. Tyler typically runs the first-year programming course, and we use a flipped classroom course. And it could be, for those of you who are interested in the summer, maybe we could open up that course and you could see the actual course that we run. I have material that I use for the graduate students for the orientation to Python. I might be able to share some of that as well, but it's not so easy to do it like that. We would need to organize it. Maybe we can do that. I don't want you to distract from the end of your academic year here, but if you're interested over the summer to be active, then I think there are things that can be done. Now, let's see. Yeah, if you're interested, Kasim, at the idea of lectures, if you would like to sit in on a class, I propose the following. We have asked our faculty before, and most of them are quite happy to do this, but you would need to be invited and have the Zoom link. Also, not all lectures are equally good for a guest, for a visitor, because some of them, in terms of where they are in the topics, are easy, and some of them would not make any sense to you at all. Here's what I would propose. Our spring semester schedule is online now from the Office of the Registrar. You go to the School of Engineering and Digital Sciences, you look for the spring term, the entire schedule is there. You can go through and decide which courses would be interesting for you, and you'll see who the instructor is. And you could write to the instructor directly and ask, may I sit in on an upcoming class? And they may or may not, but generally they're pretty agreeable. The key, if you do it now, it might work out. If you wait for 3 or 4 weeks, it won't work out because the last week of the semester, we're not allowed to introduce new material. It's more a review, and then we transition into final exams. So that's, you need to look up the courses and then write to the instructor. Okay, Zarina, thank you for writing about the CareerNet and the like. Oh, good, Lunara as well. This is great. You know, we have such good people in our offices, guys, in the admissions and in our student affairs. They know much more than I about the way things work. Now, yeah, you know, for civil and environmental engineering internships, you would have to write here either to the chair of the department or to the Career and Advising Center. Most of those are filed there, even if they're organized sometimes directly through the department. Guys, I think I've exhausted the list of questions that were at least in the chat. If I've missed any, please remind me.
I think that's everything. I was looking through the chat as well, and I don't think you've missed anything at all, Michael. I suppose we'll kind of wrap things up. I know you've been sort of answering questions here for a little while. But I suppose before we go, is there anybody else who had any questions just before we close off? Yeah, Altena, you have your hand up. If you'd like, you can ask your question out loud.
Thanks. So I wanted to ask whether I should write chairs of departments directly to ask about textbooks or materials to study this summer before coming to the undergraduate school, or should I write to the SEDS admission mail or any other?
I see. It's a good question. And my advice is that you should write to the chair with the following inquiry. You can say, I'm an incoming student of computer science, and I'd like to use the summer to prepare and review. What would you recommend? Either a book to read or a website. In some cases, they'll ask you to read not just a textbook, but there may be other contextualizing information about the discipline. And there are some great online lectures that people have given, like YouTube videos, where people talk about their vision for the future of that discipline, or what are the main ideas. I think in this regard, you should first reach out to the chair. And actually, you raise a good point. I feel like once you guys have progressed and you have a department associated with your name, that it wouldn't be a bad idea for the chairs themselves to send a note to all of the incoming students to give them a little encouragement and say, hey, if you're motivated, read this story, read this lecture, watch that video that this famous guy did. Because, I mean, why not, right? Otherwise, what are you doing this summer?
Thank you very much for answering all of my questions.
Oh, you're most welcome. Okay, it looks like there's nothing left in the chat.
Yeah, I think that's it. So with that, we'll wrap things up. As we mentioned already, I'll make sure that this recording gets posted. Zarina has kindly offered to put it on the AAO YouTube channel, and she put the link in the chat. I'll make sure that that's in the student newsletter as well. And then just a shameless plug before we go, for all of you students who are still here, this Friday, we will have some students from the SEDS program coming to tell you a little bit about their student experience in their first year, second year, third year. We'll also have some people from the different clubs associated with SEDS coming to tell you how you can get involved and what you can do to begin sort of engaging and participating in some of those things with other people who are, I don't know, interested and share your passion in the school you're hoping to go into. So I'll send out a link for that Zoom meeting. And again, it'll be this Friday at 4 o'clock. So hopefully we'll see you all again. Michael, thank you so much for coming and providing all this information.
It was a great pleasure. I encourage you guys, work hard, finish this semester well, and I really look forward to seeing you in person on campus in August.
All right. I'm going to go ahead and stop this.